When you've got a lot of mouths to feed, you need a lot of groceries. But sacrificing quality is not happening. That's why I shop at Super One Foods, where great quality and everyday low prices go hand in hand. I can save even more on things we need most, like with their super coupons. These combo packs of meat are fantastic value. And we're always sure to check out the Super Shockers. Super low prices every day. Super One Foods.
Danny Dimes is getting some love. That's not surprising, because then we play the projection game. Why can't Dan Jones be the Darnold of 2025? Maybe he can be. And I, as of a couple days ago, thought there was a good chance that we weren't going to want to match the money Jones was going to get someplace else. Now I'm beginning to think that that might be crazy, because if there's not much money for Darnold, I wouldn't think there'd be much more money for Daniel Jones in the free market as well. So maybe these teams who are desperate say, well, there's desperate, and we're just not willing to go that far. I have absolutely no idea. But maybe it's going to be one of those years where we're not going to get a good handle on the market until it actually is open, until we do. I don't know, because then maybe it just takes one team and they go, yeah, we'll surprise you a little bit. And, again, the advantage of waiting is the obvious. They may, even if they're willing to spend more money than you'd think, more than the Vikings are willing to spend, they can say, but we're not also giving up draft capital. We don't have to worry about doing that anymore. If he's a free agent, he's a free agent. And if we just get him a good enough offer that we can live with and we're satisfied with, then we don't have to mess with the Vikings at all. Correct?
Yeah, and the Vikings probably have a number like they did with Cousins in mind that they're willing to do for Sam Darnold. And if it gets a little bit higher than that, they're not desperate either.
Well, that's what somebody's saying. Well, we've been down this road and we saw it went with Cousins. Why are we thinking it could be any different here? I think it's apples and oranges, because the Cousins money was obscene.
I still remember driving to the station when it broke and Sauce and Nordo were in for Common, and they brought up the contract.
Yeah. I mean, and
everybody was stunned.
Exactly. I don't think anybody's going to be that stunned, because the money's not going to be the same for Sam Darnold. It might end up being more than the Vikings are willing to spend, but it's certainly not going to be. I mean, the Cousins numbers it's like play money. I mean, it's I don't even remember what was the final deal.
It was like 4 and 160, wasn't it?
Yeah,
something like that.
I don't think we're anywhere near that with Sam Darnold. Can you find the bumper to bumper seal of approval for me? I want to get to. We have a short segment here. Don't forget, Louis is going to join us from Seattle. He's tracking the Wild. He's going to join us at 4:30.
It's the bumper to bumper seal of approval.
One of the reasons I have such great respect for really relatively few politicians anymore, but it is so few of them, I think, take the cues of U.S. Senator John Fetterman. He's Pennsylvania, isn't he?
Yeah, and I figured when you said this, you were going Fetterman.
And I think we've probably sealed him a seal of approval to him before. And look, there's 2 tweets in a row. One of them I don't agree with him on. It's not like I agree with him on everything, but he sent out a tweet about 7 hours ago, and I don't know what the impetus was. But and I this is my sort of backhanded way of giving the Trumpists some red meat. They've been unhappy with me the last few days for some positions I've taken. Maybe they'll feel a little bit better today. In that Fetterman sent this out. It's a chart having to do with monthly U.S. border encounters. And he writes, "This is when we became the party for chaos, telling people to invalidate their eyes or experiences, and we lose. Equivalent size of Pittsburgh showing up every month at our border was true chaos." He's laying out the numbers regarding those border encounters, and you see going all the way back to 2012, you're well under 100,000 almost forever. And then under Biden, we get to 200,000. And then under Biden, we reach 300,000. And so, as he's saying, that's equivalent to the size of Pittsburgh showing up every month at our border. And what Fetterman, I think the point he's trying to make is stop pretending that was a right-wing xenophobic conspiracy. We've talked about it pretty consistently on this show for several years. under Biden, that this was this was not a made up issue. This was not just an issue that, well, the right, that's what the right want to do. The hardcore righties want to do. The xenophobes want to do. So we have to be in opposition. The numbers were untenable and unsustainable. And News Nation, I saw they just had a report yesterday. That's the quote unquote relatively independent. We try to play it somewhat down the middle. News Nation, that network. In fact, we have you have people who work for them that listen to this show.
A lot of them, yeah.
Migrant encounters, February 2024, 140,641. February 2025, 8,300. I think there is reason to believe at the border, Trump has delivered. Now, we can argue about approach. We can argue about how aggressive it got. But the fact of the matter is, that's a place to me where I have no difficulty with what he has attempted to do. I do have difficulty with who he's trying to throw out of the country. But when it comes to at the border, there aren't enough sensible Democrats, and this is I am convinced, like Fetterman is, this is part of the reason you end up losing the high ground, and you make your party unnecessarily vulnerable to Trump getting reelected. Is that the only reason he got reelected? Probably not. But those numbers are pretty interesting. And to further the point, New York Times had a great story. Headline, an immigrant neighborhood where Trump made inroads now fears ICE raids. And it lays out in Corona, a once vibrant New York City enclave home to generations of Latino immigrants, the threat of mass deportations has made many residents afraid to go outside. Not a good scene, not a good situation. There is certainly some tension there. But as they acknowledge deep into the piece, here's where I think it gets interesting. Despite those fears regarding ICE raids, let me see if I can get to it. Here's what they write. Even so, the heightened anxiety described by nearly 24 Corona residents in interviews with the New York Times belies a rather complicated reality. In New York City and across the country, Mr. Trump made significant gains in many working-class immigrant neighborhoods like Corona. He captured 46% of the national Latino vote on his way to victory and bucked conventional wisdom about Hispanic support of the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris still won Corona with about 57% of the vote, but underperformed compared with Biden in 2020, who won the area with 77% of the vote. And there are many places where that same pattern followed suit. We talked about it shortly after the election. Trump won over Hispanics who were upset about the economy, but also tapped into resentment among established immigrants over what they regarded as preferential treatment, including temporary legal status, work permits, and free shelter given to migrants who arrived during the Biden administration. In New York City, that pent-up frustration led to intense friction amid a 3-year influx of, wait for it, 230,000 migrants who spilled into Corona and other neighborhoods. Longtime residents, even undocumented immigrants who can't vote, raised quality of life concerns that many attributed to the recent arrivals. They quote a woman named Altagracia Fernandez from the Dominican Republic. She said the deteriorating conditions had nearly caused her to shutter the beauty salon she'd opened 35 years ago. Things got so bad, she said, that hosing down human excrement outside her shop became a regular morning chore. I've always voted Democratic, but I couldn't take it anymore, said Fernandez, 63, who said she voted for Trump. The situation got too severe. I'm fighting for what is mine, she said, referring to her salon. Business owners in Corona Plaza had complained about an increase in homelessness and street vendors without licenses in recent years, and local officials and residents lamented excessive trash and flashes of violence among intoxicated men who they said created visible disorder that tended to scare off customers. So how much of this is unfairly blamed on the influx? I'm sure it's more complicated than it's not automatic. But what this reminds us again is that we have to stop acting like any political bloc is a monolith. And the notion that somehow wanting less chaos in streets is a right-wing talking point that is generally exploited by the far right and that others should resist. We've talked about this in the case of the Twin Cities, but certainly Minneapolis, I think, for a number of years. And this is exactly where it dovetails nicely with Andy Luger, who we had in studio a few weeks ago. And Luger has said one of his goals since leaving, the U.S. attorney spot with the change in administration is he's going to travel the country. He insists not because he wants to run politically for any office, including in the state of Minnesota, but because he wants to suggest that what he did here as a Democrat, when it came to attempting to deal with some pretty significant crime-related issues, should make this a subject, an issue that Democrats should take back. The idea that this should that too many Democrats see this as, well, if you go down this road, you must be anti-immigration or you must be pro-right-wing and pro-cops beating people's heads in, etc. And his point is, no, there's a way to thread the needle on this thing. And that's, as I said, that's one of the things. I don't agree with Fetterman on everything, but I think it's an important reminder that part of what I think makes him attractive to centrists is his willingness to call out his own party. Some people have said, well, he might as well, given a lot of his positions, might as well be a Republican. He's not a Republican. He's a centrist Democrat.
And he's even said recently, I'd be a terrible Republican. And then outlined the reasons why.
Yes.
On major fundamental disagreements that he has with some of their big issues.
100%. Let's get a pause in. Don't forget, Louis is coming up at 4:30. Plenty of hockey conversation yet to a couple texts to get to. Let me see if I can find the couple of my favorites. I favorited one of them, so we'll save that. That one I'll hold off on. Where did it go? Oh, man, it was so good and vicious. Raiders have a huge amount of cap space. No, that's not it. I think they're like disappearing on me. It's very strange. Money isn't the Vikings. Yeah, they're disappearing. I'll read you the one that came in most recently. I have not lost that one. Authoritarian coup is ongoing and you're opining on immigration policy. See, 218 guy doesn't get it. He doesn't see the link. He doesn't get the connection. And this was, I think, part of Fetterman's point. If Democrats hadn't been stubbornly stupid and in denial on several issues, including the border, the untenable, no matter what you think about open borders, the untenable nature of that many people coming across the border in that short a period of time, then the guy you hold responsible for an authoritarian ongoing coup ain't elected. That's the point. And you wouldn't be living in this fear and loathing period of your life. That's the connection. That's part of what Fetterman, I think, is trying to say. Now, again, can you link any one issue? No, it's different people, it's different things. It's more complicated than that. But it's one of the issues. And I've said this since Election Day for the lefties who think, well, I can't believe you're talking about this stuff with this guy in charge. Why are you continually criticizing the approach that the Democrats took to this election? Because this is what we ended up with. The nonsense that we're now forced to tolerate. And you'd like to think the lesson is going to be learned, but I'm not sure that it is. Because I'm not sure there are enough Fettermans out there, quite frankly. And I don't know if, he represents enough people. I like to think there's more people who think the way he does, and maybe they just have had difficulty articulating it. I'm not Bill Maher show on Friday night basically endorsed a ticket of Fetterman Buttigieg for 2028 as the hope of the Democratic Party. That's from Poli Sci guy. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that Fetterman would really have the opportunity. I don't even know what to think of Pete at this point. What's he doing now? Was Pete back in private? What do we know? Mayor Pete, what he's up to?
I have seen him giving some speeches and doing some fireside chats, but I don't know if he has any role.
I assume he's not been given an opportunity to remain in the Trump administration, right?
I don't think so.
That seems unlikely.
Yeah, I don't think he's the transportation secretary still.
I gave News Nation a chance when it replaced WGN. It was clear pretty early on it's just another right-wing propaganda network. Try watching it sometime and see if you agree. I'll stick with Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell. Thank you very much. Matt, Little Falls, I love you. But if you don't believe, if you believe MSNBC comes close to following the story and attempting to play it down the middle, I'm worried about you. It's your choice. Anybody can watch whatever they want to watch. But I'm not interested in watching any network. And by the way, all I said on News Nation was I quoted a stat that I think is demonstrably provable that shouldn't have anything to do with whatever their ideological bent is or isn't. I don't watch them enough.
I watch them a little bit.
My sense of most of the shows is that it's more reporting than we see elsewhere. And maybe less commentary, which is, I think, what makes people suspicious.
Well, they've got Cuomo there now, too.
That's true.
So I wouldn't call him a bastion of right-wing excellence.
No, it's a good point.
And I can speak for my friend that works there specifically. If News Nation was what that texter alleges that it was, I promise you he would not be working there.
Yeah.
I promise you.
Well, I would just say, again, I think you undermine a little bit of your own credibility, though, if you're using as your example of non-propaganda, Rachel Maddow and
Lawrence
O'Donnell, who we've had on as a guest. It's been a while, but we used to have O'Donnell on.
Yep.
O'Donnell he had difficulties, as I recall. He's very critical of Clinton, if I'm not mistaken. The Clintons, both Bill and Hillary, for various reasons. Anyway, but he's become, I think, pretty ideological. It's not illegal, but I mean, I don't think I'm going to get. For example, on the issue of the border, I just don't think you're going to turn on MSNBC and have anybody say, look, these numbers, no matter how you feel about are, come one, come all, are not sustainable. There were a number of lefties from the Obama administration who said as much. But how often is that even allowed to be uttered on MSNBC? Because the game there, it's like with Fox, the game is we have a constituency that expects certain things from us. I really don't want to relitigate all of that because I think to a certain extent, it's old news, isn't it? I mean, we've been kind of down that road.
I would think it would be
before, and I know how it works. If you are a hardcore lefty, you go, no, they're fine. If you're a hardcore righty, you think Fox is fine. I'm bored with both of them. I just, for various reasons. I can't, I just don't feel, I'm never going to be, put this way, I'm never going to be surprised. I'm never going to be, I'm going to go, whoa, I didn't see them going down that road. They're asking some important questions here. They're challenging the MSNBC status quo or the Fox News status quo. Doesn't seem to be happening all that much. I wish I could find the other, God, it was so, is there a way like where you can send a text and then you can withdraw it if you have like texter's remorse?
I don't think so.
I didn't think so.
No, I don't think so.
There's definitely one that's missing here that would have been a good, very good shot. I'll see if I can find it perhaps a little bit later. Meanwhile, we are returning to the toy department at the bottom of the hour. Louis always joins us on Tuesday, often in the Fiver, but he's going to go a little early today. He is tracking your Minnesota Wild. He's in Seattle with the Wild, who will be taking on the Kraken, a game you can hear on the Fan tonight. And we'll get caught up with him on the road trip, on the Wild trade, what else the Wild might be up to by the Friday deadline, if anything. And we'll even try to mix in some high school hockey. It is high school hockey tournament week. And Louis, of course, for the first time in forever, will not be a part of it. All of that with our guy Luigi. Hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line 64686. He's next.
Well, she sneaks around the world from India to Carolina. She's a sticky-fingered filcher from Berlin down to Belize. She'll take you for a ride on a slow boat to China. Tell me, where in the world is Lou Nanne?
Well, for the first time in like 60 years, he ain't here. You know that cliche, Guardsy? You grew up with it. If it's March and there's a snowstorm, it must be state tournament time, right? And what do we got coming? Tonight into mainly tomorrow.
Yeah.
3 to 9 inches of snow, all kinds of heavy winds, winter storm warnings are out, hockey tournament week. And who do you think of? I mean, who's synonymous with all of that?
Whose voice is supposed to calm us down into the evening on Thursday and Friday night?
Do you feel any guilt or remorse at all that you're not here to partake in all of it?
I have to tell you, it's something that I thought might happen when I decided to quit. 2 years ago, as I told you, when I was thinking about it, and there was a storm like that, I said, what am I doing here? So now I'm not there.
Now you're not there. Now you're in.
Sorry for you. I'm sorry to miss that.
Yeah.
That little burst of snow you have tonight and tomorrow, just to know that it's state tournament time, but I just couldn't be there.
That sounds very, very sincere. There's no question about that. Louis is brought to you by our good friends at Kemp's. He is Dateline Seattle, Washington. Wild back in action tonight. He'll be on the TV call. We'll have the game on the radio, the Wild taking on the Seattle Kraken. We got a lot of ground to cover, including the trade the Wild made, injury updates, and perhaps even a question or two about the state high school hockey tournament as well. I believe I don't think the Kraken are in the playoffs right now. In fact, I think they're fairly buried. What happened to the Kraken of a year ago? What explains the current condition of the Wild's opponent tonight?
Well, that's a good question because they look like they were making some progress and coming along, but I want to tell you they took a step backwards that really was unexpected. They have a couple of young forwards that were highly touted, especially like Marty Beniers coming out, drafted second overall. They've had a number of guys that you would have thought at this time that they'd be producing much better than they are, and their defense, there was once, I think, more solid defensively than they are now, is giving up the goals. And when you look at them, you say they got no chance to make the playoffs, and they don't. I mean, they can always hurt you. They can always win a game because they do have a lot of good skating forwards. But overall, production-wise, they're just not there. Jaden Schwartz is the most goals of 19 on the team, and they don't have a lot of scoring, and their defense doesn't keep a lot of people away from the net. And the surprise to me is that Joey Decord, he's played 41 games compared to Grubauer that they got from Colorado, and everybody thought Colorado should have never let him go, and here he is. He's only played 21 games, and he's won 5 and lost 15, plus an overtime loss. So they're hurting in all areas, and they got a lot of work to do to get up to where they were presumed to be able to be at this time next year.
Wild obviously don't have anywhere near as much work to do. They're in a much better position. They are in the playoffs as we speak, but they're also trying to sort of keep their heads above water with the injury issues that continue. And as we approach the trade deadline, as you know, they've already made a deal to bring back veteran forward Gustav Nyquist. What did you make of that deal?
I liked it. I liked it when he was here before. I was sad that they didn't have money to keep him after the playoffs. Remember, they made the deal from 2 years ago to help their playoff run, and then at the end of the year, he was a free agent. They didn't have money to keep him. He was much more productive last year for Nashville than he is this year, although he's got 9 goals and 12 assists. He's capable of scoring, and that's what the Wild need right now. If you look at the way they're playing, just take the last game, for instance. They had a great deal of puck control in the game against Boston. They had a lot of good puck movement in the offensive zone. And they had a number of shots, quality shots, from a design play where they seem to get somebody high in the slot 3 all the time for a shot. But they're not scoring goals. They got one goal, and I know Swayman played good for Boston, but still, most of these goaltenders are going to play good. You've got to find somebody to start scoring goals besides Boldy and Rossi, and that's why maybe Hartman coming back tonight will finally find himself. Goudreau bounced back with a remarkable season after last year when he wasn't very productive. And, and fortunately, a guy like Foligno, we depend on for physicality all the time. He's got 11 goals, but need some other scoring there. You need Zuccarello to get more goals. Now you need Johansson to get more goals. You got to have some of these guys that have had a history of scoring in this league will get chances and are capable of scoring to put the puck in the net, make the difference there so that they can get a little more balance. Because these games are all going to be tight going down the line, and you got to be able to put some goals on the board to win games.
Is it realistic now? Because Guerin is now pretty much on record as saying he does expect both Eriksson Ek and Kaprizov to come back for the regular season, which means they can't do that tricky little sly game where you gain some money against the cap because they're going to sit the rest of the season and then it's all irrelevant, as at least one or two other teams have proven in the postseason. Knowing that flexibility apparently isn't going to exist for this club, is there anything dramatic that you believe is even realistic for this team to do before the Friday deadline?
Well, I had breakfast with Bill this morning, and I talked to him about that. And it's going to have to be money in, money out. In other words,
yep. If
there's a player he thinks he can get, they're going to have to take a player back. They're going to have to essentially exchange salaries unless somebody's going to hold money, like the Boston Bruins did today when they made a deal for, like Frederick and Max Jones both went to Edmonton today, and Jersey had to get involved because there had to be some money held back in the deal to make it work for everybody. And that's what the only out that the Wild would have if the money doesn't match up or is close to matching up. I'm sure he's got his eyes on somebody, and I wouldn't doubt if it would be somebody like Brock Nelson. All the Islanders now, they lost a big one last night to New York, but if they're in play, and you'll know that in a couple more games, Brock Nelson's going to be a free agent. He'd be dealt, but I'm hearing that Dallas is really, really going to make a play for him, and they've got some money to spend. And even though I would think that Brock Nelson would want to come here, it's what kind of deal can Wild make with the Islanders compared to what Dallas can do.
What kind of feel did you get from Guerin, without giving away too many family secrets, regarding the timetable on Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek, and maybe more importantly, whether they view as, okay, whenever they do come back, we think, when they're declared ready, that they can hit the ground running here, or the ice running, that we're not just bringing people back to bring them back, and they're both going to be at 68%.
Well, when they do come back, and I was happy to sort of get an indication that it's going to be, not near the end of the year, it's going to be before that, especially I think in Eriksson Ek's case. I was happy to hear that. But as we said the last time, remember when Kaprizov came back the first time, and I was saying the radio, he's coming back, but you have to remember, the legs say okay, but the head and the hands take a little while, especially the hands, to get the timing down. And you have to play some games to get that reaction ability with the puck and what they're doing with the puck. And so even though they might physically, because these guys really work hard to get in condition, especially those two, you're not going to be concerned that they're not going to be able to come on the ice and skate the way they have to skate, or even be as physical as they have to. That's the easiest part to get. The toughest part is going to get the reaction time to the plays, and especially your hands and the passing ability. That happens so fast, and you got to be so accurate that it takes some games to get. You don't get that in practice. And I was talking to Hartman today too, because he's coming back, and how does it feel condition-wise? Oh, they skating me hard. My condition's fine. But he's missed 6 games.
Yeah.
And so is conditioning fine, but how long is it going to take to be comfortable with the plays you got to make?
Well, one of the things that to me the cautionary tale, the lesson on the positive from the 1-0 victory, matinee victory on Saturday, was a reminder that in this stretch, Louis, where they don't have as many obviously offensive options, and they're not going to probably be an explosive scoring team, that they have to revert back to the way they played, right? Which was just fundamentally very sound, not giving almost anything away, waiting for the other team to screw up. And it sounds like a kind of a boring formula, but it can be very effective, and it had been through much of this season. And to me, that's obviously you at some point killing the penalty kill's got to get better, and I think they have some hopes that Nyquist can help there a little bit too. But to me, it's back to you just have to really, really play smart, sound, intelligent hockey like they had to give themselves a little equity earlier in this season if they're going to give themselves a chance to stay afloat.
That's a great point. That's exactly what you have to do. The one word you left out there, and I think that they have, it's really helped them, is patience.
Yes.
Patience during the game.
Yep.
And when you have the patience to play the way you have to play, then you're capable of doing it because you're not trying to rush things or react to things in a desperate way. You play with patience. It's terrific. And by the way, it was great to see Gustafsson come up with a magnificent game, to get that shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you got your goaltending stopping the puck and you're playing with patience, an interesting statistic is the Wild are only one of 3 teams that if they have a 2-goal lead going in the third period is undefeated. And you know what one of the 2 others is? Seattle.
Ah, interesting.
So if anybody gets a 2-goal lead tonight going into the third period, you're going to be thinking, it's going to be tough for that other team to come back because these teams have been doing it for quite a while. But the Wild get it done because of their structure and the way they played. And I have to tell you, the way he's got them playing now in the offensive zone, because so many teams are collapsing towards the net to block shots, they are always moving the third forward high. He slides up high, and they move the puck from defense to one side, and then the other side guy comes up high. And when he comes up high, he's usually in the top of the circle, but even in the middle of the ice, in the slot area, and gets a good shot. So I love the style, what they're doing to try and pull those defensemen out. But 2 things have to happen. One, you got to get the puck through bodies then. And it's very important to do that because you do have somebody in front screening and waiting for a rebound. But secondly, if you do, the goaltenders really screen quite a bit. If you're accurate at picking a side or corner, the likelihood is you're going to score. So I think that the Wild using that strategy is really giving them more opportunities, and I'm talking about quality opportunities, than I've seen them have earlier in the year.
Let's also mix in some high school hockey, and I'm not going to ask you to go deep on these teams because you're in a different role right now. But I do want to get your reaction to one change that has gotten a lot of attention. That, in fact, the seeding process has changed pretty dramatically. I believe the format that was first used 2007 until this current season. The way it worked for the casual fan, if they may not know, is that each head coach casts electronic votes for the other 7 qualifying teams, and the highest and lowest votes for each team were then excluded. 5 teams with the lowest overall scores were then awarded seeds. Then the other 3 teams were simply assigned first-round opponents via blind draw. That's what's been eliminated, as I understand it. The blind draw is gone, and now they're seeding teams 1 through 8. I'm looking at a StarTribune.com story from actually late over the weekend that lays out sort of who's in and who's out, who's missing, et cetera, because there's some interesting names there, including War Road not surviving, the section tournament, Hermantown, and Hill Murray as well. I don't know if we ever talked about the seeding thing and the change to the system. Do you like this change? Do you think it's it's more equitable, or do you not have an opinion on it?
I really know. I think it's long overdue. I was hopeful. I used to complain about that a little bit in the meetings with the coaches in the league, and I'd always say, why don't you just put 1 through 8 who you think is 1 through 8? Because then it's more fair to two things. It's more fair to the team, at the teams 1, 2, and 3, especially, that have to play these opponents, and it's also it's more fair to the guys at the bottom that you might be the 5th ranked team and you're getting the first game you're getting the top ranked person. That's not good. And I think this is really a great move that they made. But the only thing is, I was really interested in seeing the seeding myself, because I look at it now and I see, you see what the seeding was? They had 4 and 5, Rogers 4, Edina 5.
Yep.
And and you got Stillwater and Shakopee higher. And I like all the teams, but I've always wanted Moorhead to win one time, and I've had them 3 times in the finals where I thought their team was the best in the tournament, and they never won one time. So I was thinking this year might be their year. They got a great, and I knew they'd be ranked number 1 because of the season they had. But I was surprised that Edina got 5, and the reason why I was surprised is because Stillwater had to upset Hill Murray. Hill Murray was going to be ranked 2nd, and so by upsetting, they sort of jumped the pack in my mind to get higher seed than I thought they would get, and I thought that when you in Shakopee, I thought that Edina would be ranked, the worst they'd be ranked is 3, and what would that have done? That would have made sure that if both Moorhead and Edina win the first day, they wouldn't meet the second day, and I think that would be a tougher match for Moorhead on the second day, because you got a lot of guys from Edina that have been in the state tournament. Even if Moorhead's had a better year and looks better, you want to at least give the top team a couple of games before they get to that final game. And I really think that if those 2 teams win, it's not that I don't think Moorhead can't beat them. I think they can beat them, but beat Edina. But I think it's a tougher out for Moorhead than they should have been having.
Interesting.
In the second game, if it goes on.
That's an interesting point. Gargi and I were talking about this in anticipation for the discussion today, that it was our belief that this isn't going to be all that emotional a week for you, because the way you're kind of wired, which is the tournament's meant everything to you. We've talked about that before. You've written about that before. But once you make a decision, it's like, okay, that was then, had a great run, and now we move on, and it's in the rearview mirror in a way that I don't think is probably going to make it all that emotional for you. Were we right about that?
You're right on about it. I have to say that I think that the fortunate trait I have is when I make a decision, whatever the decision is, I've been able to live with it and don't second guess myself and wish that I could go back and change. And that comes from when I was playing, when I was manager, if I made a trade or a draft, whatever, when I make a deal, when I left hockey, when I came into this business, when I changed the companies one time, I never thought about, I should have done it differently. When I make a decision, I feel at that time that I'm making the decisions best that I should make, and I live with it. And I know when I make a decision, there's consequences. It could be this or that.
Sure.
But in my mind, I was confident enough to make the decision no matter how it turns out. So I shouldn't second guess myself, because before I make the decision, I have sort of an introspective look and think of, why wouldn't I make it? Why should I make it? And once I make it, and I live with it, and you hit the nail right in the head. I don't have any second thoughts about it. And I said the only change I would have made in my life, if I could make a change, would be I'd like to be able to play hockey. But I'm too old to play hockey. I can't play anymore. That's the only thing that I didn't want to make, but I had to make because I was too old to play. And then I got the opportunity to run the team immediately. But that's the only thing that I would have loved to continue to do, because I'm going to play for nothing. As I told him many times, and they paid me to do it. It just something to me was a special thing in my life that I was able to do, and fortunately for a long time, but you can't do it forever.
Will you grant the possibility, though, that for a lot of viewers, it ain't going to be easy because they do associate you with the tournament? I've gotten a lot of texts even since we've come on basically saying the same thing, that they are like dreading the first time the AA stuff starts and they don't hear your voice. That, I mean, Guardsy has waxed very nicely about this over the years. It just sort of that even if it's just as background, that your voice is soothing to people because it's comforting. It's okay. It's another hockey tournament. It's another year. So will you grant that it might be a little bit more jarring for the folks who didn't want you to make this decision, even if they respect it and understand it, that it might take a minute or two for people to suddenly get used to you not being part of the broadcast?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been getting that the last week, the last 3-4 days when I was home. Everybody I run into, or people have texted me things of that sort. I do hear that, and I'm really pleased that they feel that way, and I'm honored that they feel that way. And I expect it to be that way. In fact, Gorgie's flying. Kevin Gorgie's flying home after the game tonight.
Right.
He's flying home tomorrow morning because he's going to work. He said, "Well, we got 3 of us to take your jobs. We're all going to alternate." He and Parrish and Clymer, they're going to alternate between doing the games and working on the desk. He said, because they don't want to have just one person do it. Well, that's good. I said, well, they should have paid me 3 times as much.
You might not have left.
Yeah,
that's it.
You're right.
Yeah. Well, we said it. It's a smart move, I think, because you can't replace Lombardi. So what you do is you don't try. You say, okay, we're going to have 2 or 3 different people, in this case 3, and we'll mix and match, and we'll kind of revolve them around, and maybe one of them emerges. Who's to say? Over a period of time, and you make a decision. But it takes the pressure off those individuals for not having to mess with it. But I do think it will be. For a lot of people, it will be weird just because it's what they get. You know, it's like anything. You get in a habit. It's what you get accustomed to. And so to that extent, I think it'll end up, it's not going to like take away from the tournament. I'm not suggesting the tournament's the tournament. It's everlasting. It's Minnesota. We get all of that. But I do think it'll take a minute or two for people. It'll be jarring for people to go, God, no, now it's sinking in. It's not a joke. He really isn't going to be in that press box.
Well, they got 3 talented people that they're going to use anyway. But as I told Kevin, he said, what advice can you give me? I said, I'm going to give you advice Mel Jazz gave me the first time I was interviewing for the job in 1964. And he says, when that light goes on, you're talking to someone in your living room. Remember that. Remember that your conversation, that they can understand what you're saying and feel what you're saying. And so I says, Kevin, if I could tell you one thing, I says, they're all hockey fans that are watching the game. Some are more knowledgeable about the game than others. So you always have to make certain when you're broadcasting the game, that everybody that's watching the game can understand the point you're trying to make. You don't try and be too technical. You don't try and sound, like a hockey aficionado that you know everything else. You make it a conversation that if you're sitting in the living room with that person, that they can understand the game perfectly the way you're seeing it. They don't have to say, what is F1, what's F2, what is, that person. Make your statements as acceptable and understanding as people could have them. And so that they will enjoy the game watching it like you're enjoying the game broadcasting it.
I think the workaround for me, Luigi, this Friday is I'm going to do a split screen. I'm going to have the hockey tournament on, but I'm going to have the audio of you doing the Wild game late.
Oh, there you go. That's a good thought.
And then it'll just seem like you're doing the game. I'm not really going to be paying attention. You're going to be doing Wild Vancouver while I'm watching,
smart.
Edina Moorhead maybe, or Rogers Moorhead. And then it's like you're doing the game, and hopefully it's in triple overtime because we all know how much you love those on Friday night. So that's kind of, I think, going to be my workaround to like wean myself off of the soothing tones, the dulcet tones of Luigi. So I don't have to go cold turkey. Just have you on the side. It'll be like you're in St. Paul, even though you're not even in the country.
Well, the one thing I said to Kevin was, he said, "What do you wish for?" I said, "I wish that you have overtime. Somebody has overtime, because I'll be really disappointed if there's."
That's it.
It's going to be the fastest state tournament ever this year.
Overtime that used to drive me nuts.
There's going to be no OTs this year. It's going to be 3 periods a game and go.
That would hurt me. That would hurt me.
That's what we all should be rooting for, just to get you going.
Nice, clean games. Everybody makes their Mancini's reservations on time. It's
shortest games ever.
Yeah.
No stoppages. No nothing, and no, like you said, no three or 4 overtime games for you to for the possibility that somebody doing the broadcast might run out of gas. Have fun with the Wild tonight. We will be watching Wild against the Kraken this evening as they try to keep things going. And then, as Gardsey mentioned, you got Vancouver next on the trip, correct?
Right, Friday night. So we go to Vancouver after the game tonight. So maybe I'll be able to somehow. I'm not into that streaming. I don't know how to do it, but I'll find some way somehow that I can maybe tune in some games on Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday there.
You got to try. Yeah, you at least got to try to do that for sure. Great stuff as always, sir. Thank you for the help, and we'll chat next week. Thanks, Luigi.
Well, nice talking to you guys.
Always a pleasure. Lou Nanne, brought to you by Kemp's. We are guest-free. The final 90 minutes of this program, we got the top 5 at 5 right around the corner, and it will include what?
Darnold, Wild, Wolves, and am I starting to feel bad for Dallas Mavericks fans?